welcome back. Thank you so much for coming. If you are a return visitor, thank you for being here. You know the value of these conversations. And if you are new to Coffee and Conversations this week, you are in for a great treat. I have a spectacular guest with me, a fellow that I have become friends with. I've known for 15 years, and he literally changed the way I teach, the way I facilitate. His name is Ben Larkey. He's from Australia. He is an award-winning learning designer and facilitator, and he is always doing something new and interesting. And today we're going to talk about what that is. So rather than talk about Ben, I am going to bring Ben on camera. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Livy. Hello to your audience. I think I heard the word spectacular in there, which is way more than I see myself. But thank you for the amazing introduction. I was going, I can't wait to meet this person.
Well, here you are. Hey. So, Ben, it's true. You really did change the way I teach, the way I interact, and what it means to bring an audience to life. But I've always loved how you said in everything that you do from a capability building perspective, it is about helping people become more of their own authentic selves.
Yeah. Look, thank you, Livy. I think the thing I've always been attracted to Canadians, and I know you've got more than just Canadians in your audience, is just that sense of openness. I'm not sure if it's the culture and the fact you've got the French and the English, but you've always been Canadians are just the openest people, and that's why we love North America in particular. So yeah. Thank you. The phrase that I heard that I'm pretty sure it's not mine, but it was borrowed. It's this: be myself more, and then the caveat is with skill. So I love that bit: be myself more with skill, and that's the part that's stuck with me. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. So Ben, your journey is constantly evolving. You are constantly growing and still always focused on people and their best selves with skill, more of their best selves with skill. You just said it, and I've still bastardized what you just said. I can't believe that, but anyway, whatever. We're live, so there's no.
That's called a learner. That's called a learner. You hear things and you stitch it together. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, but tell us a little bit. Why don't we start with your journey and where that's taking you these days?
Yeah, no, thank you, Livy. So look, the podcasts always make you a chance to reflect. So I see myself in sort of blocks of 7 years. So my first 7 years, I did science, interested in how things work. Did military service, which was definitely sort of that focus on doing well, and obviously from a leadership perspective. Europe for 6 years as a facilitator with Covey, doing different things, but that was phenomenal just at the starting of the Stephen Covey Leadership Center journey. Came back to Australia, grew a business, a training company, grew it, sold it to a listed company. That growth and sale of that company was an iconic moment. Came out of that, was lost. While I was lost, started working through and found my way through coaching, and then through scaled workshops. And then I found myself at this amazing firm called Sayers. And that's the journey. So grown a business, sold a business, grown another business, merged it into another firm called Sayers. So that's why this idea of scale ups and growth is really strong in the way I'm thinking currently.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons, there's so many reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, but one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is this idea of scaling a business. So, talk a lot about starting a business, growing a business, but scaling a business is different. Now, a lot of people say they want to scale a business and get it ready to sell. Right. So that's like a whole, valuation experience, et cetera. But there's also scaling. I might have $1 million in revenue today, and I want to grow that to 10 million. That's scale. That's not just growth, that's scale. So the work that you're doing right now is about that. And so tell us what's different.
Yeah, the key element, so the firm that I'm in is an advisory and investment firms, and what it's trying to do is trying to merge the the ingredients required. So instead of just giving money to firms, and I'll define that shortly, it's this idea that how do you pair it so it's a much stronger relationship? Mm-hmm. So it's an advisory and investment firm. So there's the analytical component that's required, but there's also this, do better, do good. So those two things have come together, and that was the attraction of coming to Sayers. The thing about growth or scale up, and it's something that we're still noticing the difference is growth is generally a phase that you're always working into. So that never goes away. Growth in some way, evolution, and especially listening to the market. But scale up says that we've got a lot of our systems in place, and I thought we could talk about that and break that down a little bit further later. But in essence, that you've got your business model, you've got your team in place, and so therefore you could lead to some extra support in order to take that well-constructed, maybe cost neutral, so you don't have to be earning revenue if you're technology, but if you're a business that you've got well managed, got the things that ingredients we'll talk about, it's literally taking it to a multiple of 10. So that's the conversation that we've been noticing or been focused on is get that business so that it's ready to have an injection of something, whether or self-injection or an injection from an external, it can massively grow. And that's creating value for not just the investors, but for the management team and the shareholders.
So the business owner who's looking at scale, it really requires them to start thinking differently.
Yeah.
Right. The person who's got 5 million, maybe 1 million is too small, 1 to 10. Let's say it's 10 million to 100 million. The way a CEO thinks and how they operate on a day-to-day basis, that must change.
Look, I think it does. And I think this idea of, and I thought we'd work through it, sort of like we've noticed that there's a number of ingredients, and I thought I'd focus on 4, the main macro ingredients. I think, though, before we do, I think your point around thinking differently. So, for example, technology is just so present with all decisions that are being made. So, for example, in the Sayers firm, we have a strategy and deals team, but we have next to it a platforms and technology team. And what I've noticed is it's very hard to separate them. They're actually required to get either a sales force performing, a product to be doing what's required, or a service that needs to be really clearly communicated. So those two are really connected. And I think that's a different shift for some CEOs, whether you're coming from a traditional business or you're coming from a technology business. So either need to respect each other. So the 4 ingredients, just to pick up on your more strategic thread. So I guess if I sort of gave the headlines, I think there's going to be a really strong strategic bench strength. And I'll talk about what's the ingredients in that, and I'll make some references. The customer component, and you wouldn't be getting to a scale business without having a strong sense of it. But we talk about when you scale it up, how do you keep the customer the forefront of it? And that's not luck, that's a deliberate sort of strategy in itself. The operations component is probably the one that we notice is really clear around your business model, and I'll talk about that. But the last one is probably where I've sort of supported or come in is what's the capabilities required to make the strategy, keep the customer, and we think of operations. We think of how do we get the people to perform at this new level or as they lead more people. So they're the 4 levels. And I thought if we spent a couple of minutes in each of those, it might be interesting to your audience. And I'd love to hear any feedback or thoughts from them as well.
Sure. And they are live. We don't necessarily see the what's in the chat right now, but we can always go back and watch the replay and answer those questions to folks.
I'd love to.
Yeah. So why don't we start? Actually, why don't we start with capability?
Okay.
And you said something when we were chatting about this earlier. A lot of historically, I guess, capability is a lot of the mechanics, how you need to operate, how you need to show up, what kind of conversation you're having, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can figure out how to get the words out of your mouth and in the right sequence or the right way, you and I have done a lot of sales training together, then you might be more effective. But you were talking about the heart and where this is coming from, or where this has come from a very deep and meaningful place for you right now. So let's start there.
Oh, Livia, lovely sort of mentioning it. So I would say we've done 25% of my sort of focus is working with the Indigenous community and how we bring through some of the learns from the way they approach things. And there's this amazing leader we work with, a guy called Richard Young, phenomenal talent. He talks about this concept of hearts in, heads up, and hands on. So the emotional connection to make change, the intellectual ability to see what's required, and then the practical part. And he expresses it in an Indigenous way. And what's been really interesting, seeing that, using that Indigenous lens come across and be applied to, traditional, Western learning. So that's an example where, in terms of my evolution, it's been using that cultural lens to get leaders to have another look at how they do. And it's been amazingly impactful because it's come from a different direction and it's got a slightly more spiritual focus. So it's, we're talking about infrastructure projects, we're talking about financial services. Yeah, it's been really sort of exciting.
Yeah. Wow. And so again, it's heart in, head up,
and hands on. Yeah.
As always, you're ahead, and we need to learn from what you're doing in Australia. And so I'm sure we'll have another full conversation at some point in the new year on all of this and how we as Canadians, as North Americans, can move in this direction as well.
Done. And Libby, I would be more than happy, and I know this is live, but Richard Young, we could get him on, and he's a big thinker. So let me plant that seed and see.
All right.
There's an offer.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, good. All right. So tell us a little bit more about that, and then let's move on to the capabilities and how that impacts. How that impacts scale, or what's needed for scale, I guess, is the question.
Sure. Look, if it's playing to strengths, I like your reversing up the order. So if we talk about capabilities in the scale up, so the difference between a large enterprise, so some of the work we did with the large the fund managers, is they've got lots of people, slightly deeper pockets. And they've got teams of specialists generally who focus in scale-ups. It's much leaner. So it's usually a smaller number of people focus on it. So the first thing we've learned with capability on scale-ups is it's got to be really simple. It's got to be highly impactful, and it's got to have this feeling of it's really targeted. So if we put that lens on, it's not the mass rollout scale thing. It's actually a much more targeted approach. So that's the first one. The second big trend is, and I'm conscious of something you may have already talked about, is this concept of inflow. So it's integrated into the flow of work. So this idea that we take you out, which I know you and I have talked about this, but to take you out to learn is old-fashioned, and it's been really old-fashioned for a while, but in scale-ups, it's just not practical. So you're changing the mindset and bringing them into the flow of work. And that, once people get the idea that it's in the flow of work that I'm going to be world-class at what I do, that really gives the strong anchor point to reflection, which we all know we teach. You need to reflect, but if people don't. So this idea of simple, cost-effective flow of work, and then making in the flow of work really strongly connected to, noticing and reflecting on what you do. And then you're ready to move into, well, what's the capability? How do we deliver that capability with that lens? Simple, cost-effective flow of work. And the two areas that I know you and I have talked about is this, just dividing them into, it's either leadership or it's sales. And there's a couple little threads that we can take off there. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that, Libby? I'm conscious of with your audience and your knowledge.
Well, I think that there's, there's still a lot of traditional learning and development done where you sit in a classroom at a desk with a binder that has a lot of words in it. And that is like that's the worst case scenario, right? I never want to do that. You taught me you don't do that. You have to, we as human beings, we have brains. And I don't mean that in a, get a brain, like get smart or something, but our cognitive load needs to be paid attention to. And so when we put people in situations that are very sort of traditional learning and development concepts, traditional classroom, we're just confusing people.
Yeah.
People are saying, why am I here? When are you getting to the point? What are you doing? When can I get to my phone? Because I got stuff to do. It doesn't work. And so you have to immerse people in an experience.
Yeah.
But there's also this sort of, I don't know, this is your time to be a guest, not mine, but you asked, so I'm answering. So, there's the experiential learning that has been around for a long time where, somehow you're sort of playing this game and at the end it's got some, lesson about teamwork, right? And we know that stuff. That's not immersive. That's an experience, but it's not immersive. Immersive is in real time. I am experiencing something that is meaningful to me, not only in this moment, but for my job. And so I think that's a big difference. The traditional, we've learned a lot in the pandemic too, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. When we all moved to Zoom, like the worst thing you could do is probably put people in a Zoom meeting for a day and expect them to learn and pay attention. That's not happening. And it was like, oh, I got this live stuff. Maybe I'll just, do my live stuff on Zoom. You can't do that. So for anybody who is doing that kind of thing, they're failing. They're failing the people, but they're failing business results.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to happen. It's going to be a waste of time. So I'm going to throw it back to you. What are your thoughts?
I love it. So no, there's a couple of things. The COVID has massively accelerated this. I think what we're both agreeing on. So, for example, in Melbourne, where I'm coming from, most lockdown city in the world. So we did 256 days lockdown. When we say lockdown, allowed out for 2 hours. So no training, no thing. And what we noticed is, to your point, so when we converted, say, our coaching programs from face-to-face, they'd be 2 days. We would convert them. We'd halve the content. You double the engagement. And then you have to be 10% more animated in delivery, and you have to trust the breakout. So those are the 4 things that we found made a massive difference. So we would start at 9:30 so people could, be thinking. We'd have longer breaks and we'd finish by 3. So we effectively shrunk it, and we got as good as results as for the 2 days. And then the company saying we had no cost of flying them in, and which in Australia it's a long way to fly them in. They missed out a little bit on that collaboration and networking, but we would make that up by having lunch. They'd have lunch together, and it democratized, because it meant I facilitator couldn't interrupt the conversation because they're in breakout. So they come back for breakouts going, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And we had no control. So I didn't know what they were talking about. We gave them instructions and hoped they followed them. So value change. So this democratizing of learning and saying learning doesn't have to be that way. So I love it. The second thing that, if for your audience, I'd be interested in sort of calling out in this capability phase, you talked about this idea of in the moment. And if I made that sort of practical, so for example, feedback. So feedback was the most popular request what we found in our organization for our clients. So we would run these 90-minute, 2-hour sessions, and we'd do feedback. And when we broke the 2 hours down, really, if you took out, it was basically 45 minutes. And the key concept that people loved was just in the moment. Am I on track? Am I off track? How can I be better? And so aligning that too. So here in the connection, if I link back to a scale up, you don't need a day to do that. You don't need 90 minutes. We can do it in 15, because to teach the skill of feedback, the one that's most popular is called SBI, Situation Behavior Impact. That's the theory that you put into practice. Why don't people do it? They need to align to their values, like what I believe, and they have to have some sense of what we call line of sight, organizational need. So if I believe that this is required of the organization, I'm being true to myself by being true to you, that then I'll give the feedback. So we don't just teach feedback, we connect this. The metaphor to tie into our opening, and your audience is welcome to reflect on it, is it's like iTunes changed the world by saying, I don't want the album, just give me the song. The song is SPI. The song is my values, which is a values thing, which usually traditionally is taught, years and days apart. And then what's my company strategy, line of sight. And line of sight is how is what I do contributes, obviously, to the organization doing, and being really clear on that. There are three things that are covered generally in different albums, time zones, stages of your career. Well, we're expecting an individual who in the moment is going to give feedback. They haven't connected those together. So that's this idea of combinations of tools to solve a problem. So instead of giving someone a program, give them a toolkit. And that toolkit is then teach them how to put those combinations of tools together. That's the big idea that we say to some scale-ups or organizations is you don't need more programs. You just need really clearly defined tools. People need to be able to know where they are with those tools and then put them into practice. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years, is know your toolkit, learn how to use your toolkit. And then once I hear yours, Libby, or other people's, share it and go, oh, I never thought of using that tool in that series or that thinking to solve the problem.
Wow. We could spend all day on this.
Oh yeah, on that. Yeah. Just before I do though, can I just say, for those, I'm not sure if any of your audience are under the age of 35, but the statistic we noticed that demographic, because you always ask at the start of the program to get a sense of where people are at. If you're under 35, you want more in the moment feedback, and we couldn't work out why. And this is all the studies by Gallup and by big consulting firms. And then they've started attributed to Instagram and things, where you go like, no comment, but so they're really saying that primacy has really made a difference. So sorry, that was just the last one for your younger audience members.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I like Instagram. I'm on Instagram. Okay, let's move on. We've got about 15 minutes left. Let's quickly cover some of the other pieces. You talked about strategy, customer, and operations. So, if we can do 2 of 3 in the next 10 minutes, let's do that.
Okay, so let me. I'll just finish capability, and because in my mind, I just structurally in terms of doing it. So we talked about simple, cost effective in the flow, and that's one. If we break down the leadership that's been most in demand for helping a scale up is really a clear vision, and so there's vision. There's decision making, real clarity on decision making. People throw the word out engagement, but I know you and I are fans on coaching. So when you want engagement, use coaching, and you've probably done sessions on and conversation on that. And then the underlying ability is communication. So that's not just form, like you said, the words I speak, but it's cadence. So under leadership, we talk about the 4 key areas of leadership for a scale up to invest in: vision, decision making, coaching, and communication. And that's cadence and form, not just the words I speak. On sales, that one around clarity of who your ideal customer is, your sales process, and the sales toolkit. That's the key ones in there. So that's just to round off in specifics. And they're the ones when we go in and support organizations, we generally focus on just a couple of those key areas and get them to be clear, in the moment, and toolkit orientated. If I took that and then rolled that back up, that list of what I talked about, if I start with strategy, only because it's a nice one from a leadership perspective, preparing your business. So to prepare your business for scale up, whether it's using external investment or not, the one that I was wanted to sort of call out after seeing, hundreds of different strategy sessions and workshops, the one I love is the Play to Win by Laffey and Martin. I'm not sure if you've come across it. They're Harvard. They have 5 steps, and the 5 focus areas, and you can use it not just once, you can use it in a rolling way, but they're well researched, and they've got the ones. So the first one is to have a really clear winning aspiration, which you can update every year. So it doesn't have to be a set and forget.
Yeah.
Where are we playing, which is around the customer, the channels, the flow. So winning, aspiration, where to play. The third one's how to win. It starts to get into that little bit of that operations component that we referred to. 4, which we just talked about, is the capabilities required. And then the last one is the systems. So what are the systems that we need? So aspirations, where to play, how to win, capabilities, and systems. So that it takes you through, you can do it on a page. So that's a call out for all of the strategy methodologies that I've been asked to implement. The companies that have those are the generally the strongest. So
and to
just
call out on a page.
On a page.
If you can't see your strategy on a page, you're dead before you even started.
Well, it goes back to what we're talking about, this line of, so that's the line of sight. I can see it on a page, because then that ties into decisions and choices, which is in a startup, how do you get that people involved and engaged? It starts with there. I know I threw customer, and maybe we don't do much on customer, because it's just what often happens is when you're scaling up, the people that you've really had, how do you keep the same thing that keeps you successful? How do you keep that alive? And it's just worthy of being really clear that as we massively increase our or aiming to increase our customer focus, how do we keep that ethos that got us where we got? And it's worthy of thought. And the organizations, if seen to think about that, have a really strong, that's their guiding principle, always make a difference or are successful. So, and that's the tension between how do I grow, but to keep the connection. So that's one. The operations one, should we touch on that? Would that, if you're going to say something? Sorry. Yeah. I'm conscious of making sure I give references and signposts, so it's not, so people can have more to follow on. The operations component has been really interesting, and I've got a colleague, Marie Muir. So she's part of Sayers now, but she's ex-Deloitte. And what I'm learning from her is just this really clear idea of your operating model. So, and I thought I knew what operating model was, but actually there's quite a few different ways you can structure it. But really what it comes down to is this clarity of performance that's required, and then your prioritization. And then once you've got that, then looking at the roles and responsibilities required. Now, that sounds really, really boring and dull.
Well, I was going to say simple.
Well, it's funny. The
performance measures and prioritization. Okay, I'm with you so far.
And then that role clarity. What's really interesting when we tie it to what I said earlier around leadership, and then we link it. So if you think of a triangle up to strategy, and then we talk about what are the systems and capabilities required, the systems, and you with your institutional experience as well, your system sometimes makes it hard for an individual to reach their capability. So that operations capability is often sets the environment for the leader to be able to do the capabilities that I'm primarily focused on. So it's that awareness then, and everyone knows it, but just when you're really focusing on scale up, it's that sort of getting clarity and that tension that's required. What systems are in place that are enabling people to be their best selves. So that's the pretty cool.
Yeah. I forget the authors. It was a book called Influence quite some time ago that took the basic concept of skill and will that we normally think about as an individual. You know, do they have high skill, high will, and, you know, where are they on that 4-part quadrant? But these authors took it to the next level down, which was, or two levels down. The next level down was the social skill and will. So in your and my world, you know, we invite people to training. They get trained. They love it. They go back to their manager, and their manager rolls their eyes and says, "Oh God, you drank the Kool-Aid. You know, let's fix you on that." Right? That's low skill and will on a social level. Your peers, your managers, you know, people aren't buying in to the thing that we want is capability. The next level is environment, which is operations, right? If you have messy systems that aren't supporting what it is that you need to be doing, if you don't have the right people in the right roles doing the right things, none of it is going to work. And that strategy is not going to, and my guess, last time 2 weeks ago to Neil Miller, talked all about operationalizing a strategy. So,
Mm.
plug
Oh,
go back and listen to that Coffee and Conversations.
that makes sense.
But it just reminded me of that. It's that you can't just look at one component, and maybe operations doesn't sound like the sexy part of the business, but it is pivotal to everything.
Yeah, I agree, and I think
Yeah.
I think
And
that's
apologies to all the operations people. Of course, it's the sexiest part of the business. We all wish to do it well.
Well, I think we're focused on the customer component and the vision and the capabilities, I can see why you'd say that. I think the one that resonates strongly, LinkedIn, when they did their statistics or their LinkedIn learning analysis, whatever, 120,000, I think I'm probably underselling how much analysis they did. I think their insight from last year was the number one determiner of someone's ability to apply learning is their manager. So they called it the learning advocate. So of their, I think, 6 insights, which is in their LinkedIn learning and development report, that's number one. So the biggest determinant for slightly larger companies is my manager. Did my manager, when I come back, say, not how to go, but what did you learn? Oh, I learned some feedback. Okay, so show me or take me through it or teach me. Number one determinant, does learning come through?
Yeah.
And that's why that leadership and coaching of leadership, coaching is such an important one. On the impact on performance, that's the social, and you talked about environmental. Kepler-Trego, probably the world's largest decision-making sort of organization, training company, they did an analysis about performance, and they said which has more impact on performance. We asked this on workshops. We said which impacts a person's performance more, them, and when I say them, defined by their skill, knowledge, beliefs, and values, so them, or the environment, defined as systems, processes, leadership, culture. And so we asked them which has more impact on someone's behavior / performance. And it's always in a room, it always splits them. There's the people go, no, I control, I have say, blah, 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 drunk the Kool-Aid, done the 7 habits. Then you've got these people going, no, it's the environment, it's the systems and the process. And we get them to choose, and you can't do 50-50, which is, coward's choice. And what's interesting, and so the answer is, well, the solution, or what Kepler-Trego says, is it's something like 83% is environment, systems, process, leadership, culture. 17 is the individual. And it's a real switching point for most leaders, because the key point, the recognition is that when I see someone who's not performing or not performing at their best, instead of saying it's them, I go, what's in the environment that I've created or not created that's meaning that they're behaving that way? The ultimate card that the individual has is they leave. So that's the ultimate power an individual has. The one is for those people who choose, which is often half of a group, generally half, who say an individual can make a difference. What they're doing is they're answering it from 2 ways. So they're an individual working inside an organization. So as a leader, you are in the environment. So when you say you can make a difference, you do, because you're in the leadership component of the system or the environment. So if you're a good leader, you get really good people, get good results. If you're not retaining people, you're not getting that empowerment, you're not getting that advocacy. It's you do impact because you're in the leader. So those people have a high ownership component, are answering it as leaders, not as individuals. So it's really cool. It's a really good way in 15 minutes to get people to go, you know what? When I see something which is in the flow at work, I go, what's causing them to respond that way? Is it the system environment, or is it there? Now, we just covered what would be covered in a day in 3 or 4 minutes. And if we had a picture to go along with it, it would be a will and skill matrix, maybe, an iceberg for the logical levels that we've just talked about. And then we then move into something else. But those, we just use 2 models. That's it. You don't need to go away for a half a day to cover that off. Now we can drag that out, but now we talk about application. So the one that I wanted to, you've sparked me, and I know we're just checking time, and I'll take your guidance, but
I think we actually went over, but that's okay.
Are we over now?
I think we are.
Oh, no.
But that's okay. I want you to finish your thought, and then we'll flip to we'll close up quickly.
Okay,
I
my
got
one
so
would be
enraptured, I couldn't
my
stop.
my big one in the capability is this, and this is solving problems. So instead of making it around, we'll teach you feedback. We'll teach you how do I connect with my boss? How do I find more time? How do I build my confidence? If we use that, and then what tools are required, skills to do that, that's issues-based learning, which you and I have talked about. So
Yeah. And I think we need another conversation, Ben, for sure. Because we have talked about scaling, and we have talked about capabilities and the impact of environment, and we could talk about so much more. But it is time for us to end this conversation. I'm so sorry we have to. Ben Larkey is brilliant, you know. Get some of Ben's brilliance. That's all I can say. I think everybody probably knows how to get in touch with me. Ben, you're absolutely fantastic. I just so appreciate our friendship and our professional connection, and I know it will last for years to come. So thank you so much for being here today.
I'm honored, and thank you for introducing me to your audience. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, Libby.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Libby.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.